If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Now, I don't know about you all, but every time I hear this teaching, because it's not only in Mark's gospel, it's in Matthew and Luke, and some of it's also in John. So we hear it in some form every year, and sometimes more than that. And whenever I hear it, I feel a bit intimidated, mystified, and generally doubtful about the possibility that this is going to be the year I actually take this one on. But here I am, and here we go. When Mark wrote his gospel, the first great persecution of Christians had taken place in Rome in AD 64. Blaming the Christians for a fire that he probably started himself that destroyed much of Rome, the mad Emperor Nero had them crucified in large numbers. In the years that followed, many Christians were crucified or fed to the lions in the Colosseum because of their refusal to deny Christ or to acknowledge Caesar as God. These words of Jesus are a challenge to Christians to be ready to suffer and to face death on the cross. They would have had a great and very immediate meaning for Mark's first hearers. Christians in the first century often found themselves in this very straightforward situation: renounce Christ or die. But as relevant as that might seem, persecution for the sake of faith can't possibly be the sole or even primary subject of Jesus' words here, which are addressed to any who would be his disciples, not just in the first century Rome, third century Antioch, Reformation Europe, 20th century China, or last year in a Coptic Christian church in Egypt. Jesus speaks here to anyone, meaning everyone, who wants to follow me. Everyone, including any of us sitting here in Christ in St. Luke's Church, corner of Olney Road and Stockley Gardens, Norfolk, Virginia, in February 2018. So we know this teaching is important, and it's not tied to time and place and circumstance. So it's not about our external life, our outer reality. Perhaps this teaching is about our inner life, about our hearts and minds, thoughts and emotions, and how these are shaped in a daily way by our desire and commitment to follow Christ. This is not so much a summons to dramatic, heroic public sacrifice as it is about the mundane, everyday, simple efforts we make to change our habits of heart and mind so that they will reflect the image of God. It's about conversion, not lightning strike, but by quiet, steady, conscious, daily effort. So, where does suffering come into the picture? And what's the place of suffering in the life of a Christian? Part of the answer to that depends on whether my suffering is useful or useless. Does suffering just happen to me, or do I choose it? If you think about it, we all suffer almost constantly in all kinds of little private ways. We hurt when we are slighted or ignored or misunderstood by others. And we can easily get this replaying those slights over and over, ruminating how much this person or situation hurt or annoyed me. How often we take offense at another's way of speaking, or what they did or didn't say to us, or what actions they took or did not take. We get our noses out of joint. We feel unappreciated, much less seen or heard. We can go for hours and days on autopilot, mechanically reacting negatively to friends and strangers both. We react with annoyance and irritability, impatience and anger. We keep accounts. We keep track. We think or even plot how to get even. The ruminations just flow. Sometimes we comfort ourselves with gleeful enjoyment at another person's embarrassment or ill fortune. We are filled with self-pity when no one seems to recognize or appreciate us. Some of us are more bothered than others by caps being left off the toothpaste or clutter left on tables, getting cut off in traffic or stuck in a line somewhere. We have attitudes towards religion, sex, politics, science, society, sports, marriage, divorce, drink, gambling. And we get offended when others differ or don't agree with us. Now, much of this is under the surface, carefully hidden, though a lot of it we're not even aware of. But there is an internal commentary going on much of the time about my likes and dislikes, about how I suffer from all those fools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This kind of suffering is very real, but it's useless. So, what if I could get a hold of myself and try to stop all this mechanical way of negativity, this anger, this irritation and annoyance, this judging the other, cutting them no slack, this self-pity? What if I could deny myself a remark or a reaction by just shutting my mouth and not saying those words to prove how right and how smart I am? What if I try to not set another straight and just let them be? My mother used a word when we children were being too rambunctious. She'd tell us to control our caparosity, which I think meant to dial ourselves back and settle down. So what if we just tried to control our caparosity? Maybe that would be a useful kind of suffering, to deny ourselves by struggling to not get caught up in our habitual negative reactions that are so automatic and unthinking. To challenge my automatic unconscious reactions is counterintuitive, because to win the argument and feel right feels so good. To feel indignant, superior, the victim of another's stupidity and arrogance, can give us such a sense of being strong, in control, and really alive. Self-indulgence, suffused with negativity, can be downright pleasurable. But the kind of suffering, the suffering by self-denial, will not be as glorious as marching into the Colosseum to be eaten by lions or nailed to a cross. It is much less heroic, more mundane, even full of drudgery that no one can see us doing. It's like nobody knows but me. So we don't even have the satisfaction of having it seen and appreciated, much less admired. It's hard work to try to take the time to understand where that other person who just offended me might be coming from. Our reactions are so quick and automatic that it is hard work to catch them and reel them in. Now, why engage in this struggle? Why engage in this struggle that involves useful suffering, you might ask? We are being invited to die daily to an old way of being, centered in what Cynthia Bourgeault calls the busy, anxious little I, so preoccupied with its goals, fears, desires, and issues. Jesus taught from the conviction that we human beings are the victims of a tragic case of mistaken identity because we identify with this busy, anxious little I. Cynthia continues in her wonderful book, Centering Prayer and Inner Awakening, that, quote, this small, anxious, reactive person is never even remotely the whole of who I am. And to seek fulfillment of my life at this level means to miss out on the bigger life. The kind of suffering that we endure by struggling against our habitual, mechanical negativity, born out of fear and a sense of inadequacy, can be useful in helping to change, even transform us into our larger selves, into more compassionate, empathic, and just human beings, into followers of the way of Jesus, from the way of fear and narrowness and scarcity into the way of love and abundance. Perhaps if you and I can make our sacrifice of self-denial in this useful, humble, mundane, hidden way of suffering, we might just develop a more compassionate, just corner of the Jesus movement here in Tidewater, Virginia. For we are made in the image of God. So God is, so we are to be. As a follower of Jesus, you and I can grow in love and compassion, because love is the purpose of the Christian life after all. We are made to love one another deeply from the heart. That is our true vocation, our true being. So let us deny ourselves then, take up our cross, and follow Jesus.